Before the body shuts down, before the silence, there is always one subtle sign that comes first. It's quiet, easy to miss, and rarely taken seriously, but it's almost always there. This is the first sign the elderly give just days before death. If you've ever witnessed this in someone you love, share your story in the comments. It could help others recognize the moment before it's too late.
Have you ever wondered what the human body tries to tell us in its final days? What if I told you there's one specific sign that appears consistently in elderly patients 3 to 7 days before death? A sign so subtle that families often miss it completely. I'm Dr. Vasconcelos, and in my 30 years of medical practice, I've witnessed this pattern thousands of times. Today, I'm going to share with you the most important medical knowledge that could help you recognize when your loved one is entering their final journey. This isn't about fear. It's about preparation, dignity, and love. The human body is an incredible machine that communicates with us constantly. When death approaches, especially in elderly patients, the body begins a systematic shutdown process that follows predictable patterns. Most families focus on dramatic symptoms like difficulty breathing or loss of consciousness, but the first sign is much more subtle and appears days before these obvious changes. This early warning system exists because our bodies are designed to prepare us, even for death. What I'm about to reveal might be difficult to hear, but understanding these signs can transform how you care for elderly family members. It can help you make crucial decisions about medical care, family visits, and final conversations. More importantly, recognizing this first sign allows you to provide comfort and support when it matters most. The medical community has documented this pattern extensively, yet most families remain unaware of what to look for. This first sign involves a specific change in the elderly person's interaction with food and water. It's not just loss of appetite. That's common in many illnesses. What I'm talking about is something far more profound and systematic. The body begins to reject sustenance at a cellular level, triggering a cascade of physiological changes that medical professionals recognize as the beginning of the dying process. But there's something even more specific that happens first, something most people overlook completely. Before we dive deeper into this crucial information, I want you to understand that recognizing these signs isn't about giving up hope. It's about providing the best possible care and ensuring your loved one's comfort during their final journey. If you're finding this information valuable, please give this video a like. It helps me reach more families who need this knowledge. And there's something else I need to tell you about what happens next in this process. The first sign that death is approaching in elderly patients isn't dramatic or obvious. It's a subtle change in their relationship with temperature regulation. About 5 to 7 days before death, elderly individuals begin to seek warmth in unusual ways. They'll ask for extra blankets even when the room feels comfortable to others, or they'll move closer to heat sources like radiators or sunny windows. This isn't ordinary feeling cold. This is their body's core temperature regulation system beginning to fail. What's happening scientifically is fascinating and heartbreaking at the same time. The elderly person's circulation begins to prioritize vital organs, slowly withdrawing blood flow from extremities. Their hands and feet start feeling cold to the touch, but more importantly, their internal temperature sensors become hypersensitive. They genuinely feel cold even when their body temperature reads normal on a thermometer. This thermoregulatory dysfunction is one of the earliest measurable signs that the body's systems are beginning to shut down. Medical research shows that this temperature dysregulation occurs because the hypothalamus, our body's internal thermostat, starts receiving mixed signals from failing organ systems. The elderly person might complain about feeling cold while simultaneously having episodes of sudden warmth or sweating. These temperature fluctuations happen because their autonomic nervous system, which controls automatic body functions, is beginning to malfunction. Family members often dismiss this as normal aging, but it's actually a critical early warning sign. But here's what makes this sign even more significant. Along with seeking warmth, elderly patients begin showing a specific behavior change that medical professionals call nesting. They start arranging their immediate environment in particular ways, gathering comfort items close to them and expressing unusual concern about their sleeping arrangements. This isn't conscious preparation for death. It's an instinctive biological response that humans share with many other mammals approaching their final days. The combination of temperature sensitivity and nesting behavior creates a recognizable pattern that experienced healthcare workers learn to identify. When an elderly person suddenly becomes preoccupied with staying warm and arranging their personal space, especially if they've been stable for weeks or months, it often indicates the beginning of the dying process. But there's something even more specific about how they interact with their environment that I need to explain. Something that happens in the next phase of this process. Following the temperature changes, the next sign appears within 24 to 48 hours, a distinctive change in the elderly person's sleep patterns that goes far beyond normal aging-related sleep issues. They begin experiencing what medical professionals call transitional sleep, where the boundaries between waking and sleeping become blurred. You'll notice them having conversations with people who aren't there, not as hallucinations, but as if they're existing in multiple realities simultaneously. This sleep pattern change occurs because the brain begins reducing its production of neurotransmitters that maintain clear consciousness states. The elderly person might sleep for 20 hours a day, waking only briefly for essential needs. When they are awake, they often seem confused about time, asking if it's morning when it's evening, or wondering why someone isn't visiting when that person was just there. This isn't dementia or confusion. It's the brain's natural preparation for death, gradually disconnecting from external reality. What's particularly important for families to understand is that during these sleep transitions, elderly individuals often experience what researchers call deathbed phenomena. They might speak to deceased relatives, describe seeing beautiful places, or express readiness to go home even when they are home. These experiences aren't distressing for them, quite the opposite. Medical studies show that patients experiencing these phenomena report feelings of peace and anticipation rather than fear or anxiety. The physiological explanation involves changes in brain chemistry and reduced oxygen to certain brain regions. As circulation becomes less efficient, the brain begins prioritizing essential functions while allowing non-essential awareness to fade. This creates a natural, gentle transition away from full consciousness. The elderly person isn't suffering during this process. They're experiencing what many describe as a gradual, peaceful disconnection from physical discomfort and worldly concerns. During this phase, families often panic, thinking their loved one is deteriorating rapidly, but understanding that this sleep pattern change is natural and expected can help you provide appropriate comfort rather than unnecessary medical interventions. However, there's something crucial about how their body begins rejecting sustenance that you need to know, and this next sign can appear within hours of the sleep pattern changes. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for more life-saving medical information like this. The third sign appears as a systematic rejection of food and fluids that's completely different from ordinary loss of appetite. This isn't about not feeling hungry. It's about the body actively refusing sustenance at a cellular level. The elderly person might take a sip of water and immediately feel nauseous, or take one bite of their favorite food and push the plate away with genuine revulsion. Their body is beginning to shut down digestive processes in preparation for death. Medically, this happens because the digestive system requires enormous energy to function properly. As the body prioritizes vital organs like the heart and brain, it systematically shuts down less essential systems. The stomach reduces acid production, intestinal motility slows dramatically, and the liver begins decreasing its processing functions. What families see as stubborn refusal to eat is actually the body's intelligent preparation for its final phase. This nutritional rejection follows a specific pattern that healthcare professionals recognize. First, the elderly person loses interest in solid foods, particularly proteins and complex carbohydrates. That require significant digestive energy. They might still accept small amounts of liquids or simple sugars. Within days, even liquids become difficult to tolerate. Eventually, they may refuse everything except tiny ice chips or drops of water to moisten their mouth. Family members often become distressed, trying to force nutrition or considering feeding tubes. But medical research clearly shows that forcing nutrition during this phase can actually increase discomfort without extending life meaningfully. The body's refusal to accept food is protective. It's preventing the digestive distress that would occur if the failing system tried to process nutrients it can no longer handle effectively. What's particularly important to understand is that this nutritional rejection doesn't cause death. It's a sign that death is approaching from other causes. The elderly person isn't starving to death. Their body is preparing for death by eliminating processes that would create discomfort. This is why hospice care focuses on comfort rather than forced nutrition during end-of-life care. But there's something happening with their breathing that you absolutely must recognize, and this next sign can literally help you know when you have hours, not days, remaining. The fourth sign involves distinctive changes in breathing patterns that medical professionals call Cheney-Stokes respiration. This isn't simply difficulty breathing. It's a specific pattern where the elderly person breathes rapidly for 30 to 60 seconds, then stops breathing completely for 10 to 30 seconds, then begins the cycle again. This irregular breathing pattern indicates that the brain's respiratory control center is beginning to malfunction. What's happening physiologically is that carbon dioxide levels in the blood are fluctuating dramatically. When CO2 builds up during the non-breathing periods, the brain triggers rapid breathing to eliminate it. Once levels drop, the breathing drive disappears temporarily, creating the pause. This cycle continues as the brain's ability to maintain steady respiratory control deteriorates. It's not uncomfortable for the patient. They're typically unconscious or semi-conscious during this phase. This breathing pattern can be extremely distressing for families to witness, but understanding the medical explanation can provide some comfort. The elderly person isn't gasping for air or struggling to breathe. Their brain is simply losing its ability to coordinate breathing automatically. During the pauses, they're not experiencing breathlessness or panic. Their reduced consciousness means they're unaware of the breathing irregularity. Medical research shows that Cheney-Stokes respiration typically appears 12 to 24 hours before death, making it one of the most reliable indicators that death is imminent. However, some patients can continue this pattern for several days, especially if they're receiving supplemental oxygen or other supportive care. The key is recognizing that once this breathing pattern begins, the focus should shift entirely to comfort care rather than curative treatments. Along with the irregular breathing, you might notice other respiratory changes. The elderly person's breathing may become very shallow, using only the upper chest rather than deep abdominal breathing. You might hear congestion or rattling sounds, which occur because they can no longer clear secretions effectively. These sounds, while concerning to families, typically don't cause distress to the patient. But there's something happening with their skin and circulation that provides an even more precise timeline. And what I'm about to tell you next could help you make crucial decisions about final moments. The fifth sign involves dramatic changes in circulation that create a distinctive skin mottling pattern called livido reticularis. Starting from the feet and hands, the elderly person's skin develops a blotchy, purplish pattern that looks almost like lace or a net. This mottling occurs because circulation is becoming so poor that blood pools in certain areas while other areas receive inadequate blood flow. This sign typically appears 6 to 12 hours before death. The mottling pattern has specific characteristics that help medical professionals assess how much time remains. It usually starts at the extremities and gradually moves toward the core of the body. When the mottling reaches the knees and elbows, death typically occurs within hours. When it extends to the torso, death is usually imminent within 1 to 3 hours. This progression is so reliable that experienced hospice nurses use it to guide families about when to gather for final moments. Simultaneously with the skin mottling, the elderly person's hands and feet become noticeably cold and may appear slightly blue or gray. This happens because the heart can no longer pump blood effectively to the extremities. The body prioritizes blood flow to vital organs, essentially sacrificing circulation to arms and legs to maintain heart and brain function as long as possible. The coldness typically progresses from fingers and toes toward the center of the body. What's remarkable about this circulatory shutdown is how systematic and predictable it is. The body follows an almost programmed sequence, shutting down peripheral circulation first, then gradually reducing blood flow to less essential organs. The kidneys typically reduce function significantly, which is why urine output decreases dramatically or stops entirely. the liver begins shutting down its hundreds of chemical processes, which can cause slight yellowing of the skin or whites of the eyes. During this circulatory phase, the elderly person's pulse becomes increasingly weak and irregular. You might feel their pulse racing for a few minutes, then becoming very slow, then racing again. Blood pressure drops significantly, often becoming unmeasurable with standard equipment. These cardiovascular changes aren't painful for the patient. Their reduced consciousness means they're unaware of these physical changes. However, there's something happening with their mental state during these final hours that families need to understand. Something that can provide incredible comfort if you know what to expect. The sixth sign involves profound neurological changes that create what medical professionals call terminal lucidity, a phenomenon where some elderly patients experience unexpected moments of clarity and alertness just hours before death. After days or weeks of confusion or unconsciousness, they might suddenly wake up, recognize family members, and engage in meaningful conversation. This temporary improvement isn't recovery. It's the brain's final surge of activity before shutting down. Terminal lucidity occurs in approximately 10 to 15% of dying patients, and while we don't fully understand the mechanism, researchers believe it happens when dying brain cells release their remaining neurotransmitters all at once. This creates a brief period where the person seems more alert and aware than they've been in days or weeks. They might ask for specific family members, express love, or even give final instructions. These moments are precious gifts for families, but typically last only minutes to hours. More commonly during this neurological phase, elderly patients enter what's called active, dying consciousness. They become unresponsive to external stimuli, but may still have some awareness of their surroundings. Research suggests that hearing remains functional even when other senses have shut down, which is why healthcare workers encourage families to continue talking to their loved ones, playing favorite music, or reading meaningful passages during final hours. The brain's shutdown process affects different regions at different rates. The areas controlling consciousness and personality typically shut down first, while primitive brain functions like breathing and heart rate continue. This is why a person might appear unconscious but still respond to touch or familiar voices with slight movements or changes in breathing patterns. Their brain is transitioning from complex human consciousness to basic biological functioning. During this neurological transition, you might notice involuntary movements, facial twitching, or restlessness. These aren't signs of discomfort. They're simply the nervous system's final electrical activity as brain cells lose their ability to function normally. Some patients experience what looks like reaching movements, as if trying to grasp something invisible. Medical literature suggests this might be related to neurological processes we don't fully understand yet, but there's something happening in these final moments that represents the most profound medical mystery of human death, and understanding it can transform how you experience loss. The seventh and final sign occurs in the last 1 to 3 hours before death and involves a complete physiological surrender that medical professionals call pre-mortem respiratory changes. The irregular Cheney-Stokes breathing pattern typically evolves into increasingly long pauses between breaths, with each breath becoming shallower and more spaced apart. Eventually, the elderly person takes what appears to be their final breath, followed by a pause that might last 30 seconds to several minutes before taking 1 or 2 more breaths. During these final hours, the body temperature often spikes slightly before beginning its final decline. This temperature increase happens because the hypothalamus loses its regulatory control completely, allowing body temperature to fluctuate wildly. The elderly person might feel warm to the touch, even as their extremities remain cold. This temperature dysregulation is one of the final signs that death is truly imminent. What's medically fascinating about these final hours is how the body prioritizes its remaining energy. The heart continues beating long after breathing becomes irregular, sometimes continuing for minutes after the last breath. This happens because cardiac muscle has its own electrical system and can function independently of brain control longer than respiratory muscles. The final heartbeats gradually become weaker and more irregular until they finally cease. The most profound aspect of these final hours is something that medical science has documented but cannot fully explain. The moment of death itself often appears peaceful, even in patients who have been restless or uncomfortable. Their facial muscles relax, creating an expression of calm or even slight contentment. Many families report that their loved one looked younger or more peaceful in death than they had in their final days of life. Medical research has identified specific physiological markers that occur at the moment of death. Brain activity, as measured by EEG, typically ceases within seconds of the final heartbeat. Body temperature begins dropping immediately, losing approximately 1 to 2 degrees per hour initially. Muscle tension releases completely, which is why the jaw often relaxes and the mouth may fall slightly open. These physical changes mark the transition from life to death, but there's something else happening that science is just beginning to understand about consciousness and the dying process. If this information has been helpful, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with others who might benefit from understanding these natural processes. But what I haven't told you yet is the most important part: what you can do when you recognize these signs. And there's one crucial mistake that 90% of families make during this process. Here's what most medical professionals won't tell you, and what I've learned from 3 decades of helping families through death. Recognizing these 7 signs isn't just about predicting death. It's about transforming how you provide care and comfort during life's most sacred transition. When you understand that temperature seeking, sleep changes, food rejection, breathing irregularities, circulation shutdown, neurological transitions, and final respiratory changes are natural processes, you can stop fighting against them and start supporting your loved one through them. The biggest mistake families make is trying to reverse these signs instead of accepting them as the body's natural preparation for death. They rush to hospitals demanding interventions, force feeding tubes, insist on IV fluids, or request aggressive treatments that only increase discomfort without changing the outcome. Understanding these signs allows you to shift from cure-focused thinking to comfort-focused care, which actually provides better quality of life during final days. What medical science has proven beyond doubt is that when these signs appear, the elderly person benefits most from what we call comfort care, keeping them warm when they seek warmth, accepting their reduced food intake, managing any discomfort with appropriate medications, and most importantly, providing loving presence during their transition. This approach honors the body's natural dying process while ensuring dignity and peace. But there's something even more profound that happens when families understand and accept these signs. They stop wasting precious time on futile medical interventions and instead focus on emotional and spiritual preparation. They have meaningful conversations, express love, share memories, and provide the kind of presence that truly matters during final days. Medical research shows that patients whose families understand the dying process experience significantly less anxiety and more peaceful deaths. The truth is that death, when it comes naturally to elderly individuals, is rarely the traumatic experience we fear. When these 7 signs appear in sequence, they indicate that the body is following its biologically programmed shutdown process, a process designed to minimize suffering and maximize dignity. Understanding this can transform fear into acceptance, panic into peace, and medical crisis into sacred transition. What I want you to remember most is that recognizing these signs early gives you the gift of time. Time to gather important people, time for final conversations, time to create peaceful environments, and time to say goodbye properly. But there's one more critical piece of information about what happens in the hours immediately after death that every family needs to know, and it could completely change how you handle the most difficult day of your life.